Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining Verifi's webinar, Resolution Without Borders, Global RDR Expansion. Today's session is presented by Jeff Sawicki, our Head of Product here at Verifi, and we're super excited to be joined by a guest speaker, Lauren Adcock from Adaptive Health. Disputes are vital for the payments ecosystem, but can often cause issues for all stakeholders and sometimes deteriorate the customer experience. Today, Jeff and Lauren will discuss the technology available to resolve pre-disputes and how it is now a truly global solution, and we'll discuss some of the benefits experienced by all stakeholders. We will hold a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. On your screen on the right-hand side, you will see a module for entering questions. Please add your questions there and we'll get to them at the end. So it's over to you, Jeff.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Jeff Sawicki. I'm Head of Product at Verifi. Really excited to be here discussing our RDR expansion with everyone. We're going to be getting into some of the details of just what the program and the solution offers and the expansion that we've been working towards over the last several months. So really also excited to be joined here by Lauren. Lauren, can you go ahead and introduce yourself and give some background?
Absolutely. Thanks, Jeff. Like Jeff mentioned, I'm Lauren Adcock, Director of Customer Service at Adaptive Health. I've been with Adaptive Health, a vitamin and supplement company, for almost 12 years. We've been working with Verifi since 2011 and have utilized several of their preventative tools. And a while back, they reached out to us about participating in the beta testing phase of RDR. So we've been a part of RDR from the start, and I'm happy to be joining today to share with you all insights into how we're utilizing the tool.
Great, thanks, Lauren. Really excited to have you here as well. We're going to start by just looking at the market and the payments landscape and what disputes have been doing for the last several months. All right, so we were able to pull some stats from the VisaNet platform and wanted to share this with the audience as we're all dealing with disputes and the fortunate news of growing transaction volumes even in the wake of the pandemic. So just to share some stats here, nearly 90 million Visa disputes for the time period noted. While that may sound like a big number, disputes are still far less than 1% of the overall transaction volume. So certainly something that is top of mind for all merchants or sellers, but in the grand scheme of things, less than 1%. But as everyone knows, it's still very impactful and expensive for our operations. So what's also interesting is while transactions have grown between the time period of 2019 to 2021, disputes actually grew quicker. And so that acceleration of disputes really feeds into why Visa and Verifi have focused on it, making investments and looking at how to address these pain points and come up with some innovative solutions to help sellers create a better experience for their consumers and also benefit issuers along the way. So we're going to talk more about that with our RDR solution and get into some of the market feedback that we've received. All right, so let's start to frame this up by some feedback or with some feedback from the marketplace. So through Visa and Verifi's relationships with both issuers and sellers, we engage with them to understand what is it that they need in order to create a better cardholder experience, drive operational efficiency, and overall provide a better experience for their cardholders. And through that feedback, it really, what resonated or what really became very clear is disputes are painful, right? The organizations want to focus resources on growing their business, not necessarily handling these exceptions that occur far less than 1% of the time. But they also realize that the dispute process is expensive, it's timely, So all those things lead to the desire for a way to facilitate resolution more quickly, make decisions, and ultimately eliminate those unnecessary disputes. Lauren, do you have some thoughts here that you can share?
Absolutely. As sellers, we can likely all relate to a large portion of our chargebacks being quote-unquote unnecessary. A lot of times, customers expect to have a difficult time contacting a seller. Customers assume that they're going to have to jump through hoops to cancel or get a refund, and they don't want to have to deal with pushy save and sale offers. So they typically go straight to the dispute process, thinking it's going to be the easiest and quickest resolution for them. But in reality, it actually ends up being more time-consuming and costly, and typically ends up being a worse seller and customer experience.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you. So let's look now, given this feedback, Visa and Verifi have been focused on innovating this space, and we got some really exciting solutions to help combat this. So let's first define the pre-dispute category. So when we look at the market feedback and the insights we're collecting through that, we identified this post-purchase experience between the time the settlement of the transaction takes place till the point at which a cardholder may raise that dispute, and then the merchant would receive that from their acquirer. That's really that pre-dispute phase where we've really been focused on how do we drive and create solutions for sellers to manage any of those inquiries that may arise during that point in time. And the solution of rapid dispute resolution fits within that pre-dispute phase. So what rapid dispute resolution is, or RDR, is a rules-based decisioning engine that allows sellers to define rules to determine if they want to accept or decline the liability for a transaction when it's being challenged by the cardholder. So this directly in response to that market feedback of enabling more control and the ability to automate and quickly resolve disputes, we're really excited about bringing the rapid dispute resolution to market, or the service to market, and empowering sellers with that control and the ability to leverage this solution. The benefits by a seller using rapid dispute resolution, they can have a positive impact on their dispute ratios for those disputes that are accepted through rapid dispute resolution. Those disputes would not count against the dispute ratio calculations for that merchant. So that's one of the gains. The other is the operational efficiency. Being able to automate these resolutions in a very easy to use tool gives some operational gains to those sellers. And at the end of the day, it's all about reducing costs, reducing labor and other expenses related to this dispute flow. So let's take a moment to talk about how the rapid dispute resolution rules are defined and set up. So on the right side here, we've got a screenshot of the system to show how the rules can be configured. The rules that get defined by sellers are focused on which pre-disputes want to be accepted. So that's very important when you're thinking about how to automate the rules and define and thinking about the segment of your disputes that you may have a strategy to not fight through a dispute response process. You may look at, you just don't have staff for addressing a segment of disputes, or you simply just want to accept all disputes and drive that optimal cardholder experience and automate the process in its entirety. Using the rules that allows you to define those pre-disputes that want to be accepted. The rules themselves, there's various attributes such as the amount of the transaction, the currency code, the issuer that the dispute may be coming from. Those are all attributes that can be defined as part of the rule so that you can, again, determine which ones want to be or you're going to be accepting as a business. Lauren, you've got some rules set up. How did you go about creating those? Any details you'd like to share?
Sure. So typically when we start a new preventative solution, our first step is to get as much data as possible. So for us, we currently don't have any rule flags set up. We're accepting all RDRs that come through. This is especially helpful for when we go back and do a deep dive into the data at the end of the year and assess what we've seen so far and decide what additional rules would be most beneficial moving forward.
Yep, and that's actually very much in line with our other customers who are using the service. More than 90% of them are just using an amount or a single attribute to determine the acceptance, and the vast majority are accepting the disputes at a very high rate. So nearly 80% of those eligible pre-disputes are being accepted by our customers. So really good to see the tool being used and obviously driving the automation and efficiency. As Lauren shared, sellers have different approaches to their strategy for how they're going to define their rules. We are seeing that vary across the organizations that are using the RDR solution today. Some are doing it based on the segments, or it could be price points, it could be based on currencies. And again, there's the attributes that can be leveraged to create really, really detailed and complex multivariant conditions. It could be a dollar amount greater than X for a certain bin range or for a certain segment identified by other attributes included. So it's really the flexibility. We really aim to give a flexible but very capable solution for our sellers so that they can be in control and and define which disputes they want to accept during this pre-dispute phase of the life cycle. As we've reviewed what rapid dispute resolution is and how it operates, a third component, which is very critical, is coverage. And with Visa having the largest financial network in the world, we're able to activate rapid dispute resolution very quickly with that global reach across all regions, all markets. And this is something that we're very excited about, being able to quickly deploy a solution that truly is global, and it gives our customers who may be operating in a single region, such as North America, to other customers who are operating truly across regions, that single solution that can get them the same type of experience they want to offer to their consumers. They can use one solution to apply across all those regions. So for us, at the start of 2021, we had roughly 55% as of April, and then this past October, we saw a nice adoption across the globe from our issuers, and we're currently at 71% global issuer coverage. And then as we look forward in Q1 of next year, we're going to be having some additional expansion coming from the Canadian market, and we're continuing to look and work very closely with our issuer partners in other regions to secure that expansion and continue to offer that truly global solution for our customers. Now let's take a look at some of the growth and expansion, and just wanted to share a couple stats with the audience here. Again, just to give some perspective on the network and its capabilities and what we've been able to drive with our sellers using the service today. So through 2021, year to date, over 500,000 disputes have been accepted using RDR. So this is truly, it is truly global. We have a very, very wide range of sellers across many different verticals using the solution, really continuing to get feedback. I always appreciate feedback from our customers using our solutions. But in general, we feel we're off to a great start and really excited about the future of RDR and the capabilities. Over those 500,000, the dollar amount's been over $20 million, which has been accepted. So again, really good growth for a solution that's just been in market for basically less than a year. And then the couple key stats here that we're seeing, which we're obviously monitoring and tracking very closely, is that accept rate. And that's 85+% of the time sellers are accepting those eligible disputes through that pre-dispute service, and then getting the benefits of the lower dispute ratio, as well as the operational efficiencies and lower costs to just manage disputes. So all really compelling stats. Lauren, from your perspective, or can you share some experiences on the growth and what you're seeing?
Absolutely. Like I mentioned earlier, we've been part of RDR since the testing phase, and so really have firsthand experience seeing the program grow and expand. We've seen volume grow month over month as more issuers join the program.
Yep, absolutely. And we're excited for more growth to come, and that's where just leveraging the framework and the rules that you have in place, as more issuers participate, then that drives further cost savings and efficiencies for you. So really excited and again, appreciate your perspective there.
Absolutely.
So as we look to summarize the benefits of rapid dispute resolution, I think it's important that we think back to the market feedback and some of the pain points that were raised and what we were looking to accomplish by creating this pre-dispute solution. Across the board, we wanted to make sure it was a balanced solution and that all stakeholders receive benefit. And so this slide gives some perspective on that. So across acquirers, issuers, sellers, and consumers, we're aiming for the solution to drive efficiency, transparency, and overall better experience. So on the acquiring side, one of the things that they highlighted to us very early on as we were ideating and discussing the potential solution with them was that they wanted to make sure it worked within the existing rails and the existing framework of the financial messages that are exchanged between the Visa network and the acquirers. And we did so, we leveraged that, we expanded those capabilities, and then that's what gives them that transparency to know that this dispute was accepted through RDR. There's indicators in those financial messages so that they understand and then can create the proper reporting and reconciliation files and information for the merchants or sellers to help reconcile and track that. And that's something we've been working very closely with our acquiring partners on. And then on the issuer side, it's all about simplifying the process, ensuring that we can give them through RDR that real-time resolution, so they know that when their cardholder has raised a dispute, they know that the merchants accepted it through the RDR process, and then they can provide whatever kind of reporting, or in the case of a provisional credit, they can make that provisional credit become permanent, and that ultimately leads to that optimal customer experience. So we're all about, we obviously want to see payment growth expand and accelerate, but we need to ensure that disputes don't become deterrent to that, or a more of a problem for any of these stakeholders as we're looking to drive payments adoption and just the digital transformation that's happening within our space. So we're really excited about RDR. We're really excited about how we can drive these experiences and these benefits across each of these stakeholder segments. And so we're gonna turn now to Lauren and ask her to share some additional experiences from the seller perspective.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so 3 things that Adaptive Health looks for in preventative tools are cost savings, efficiency, and of course, customer experience. As a small team, we rely on tools like RDR to maintain compliance thresholds and provide customer solutions at scale while allowing us to focus manpower on other areas like revenue generating opportunities. I think we can all agree that we're currently in a time where customers expect immediate resolution, and thankfully RDR has allowed us to provide that to them. It has also presented us with a better chance of communicating with these customers. We've found that once a customer enters the dispute track, we as the seller, our hands are tied. We're unable to issue refunds. Our chances of getting products back are greatly reduced. And with RDR, we're finding we're able to issue a refund immediately, provide a quick and efficient resolution to the consumer, as well as increase our chance of actually being able to stop unwanted orders from going out. We're able to get products returned back to us. We're able to communicate with the customer in general more so through RDR. This allows us to see the cost savings and obviously provide a great customer experience. Since implementing RDR, we have seen a decrease in chargebacks. For us, that means reducing our compliance threshold numbers, saving money. We're not having any of the extra fees that come with the chargeback process. So at the end of the day, we're a lot happier, and we feel like our customers are getting a better experience and are also going to come out of this happier. So let us move over to a quick visual. Okay, let's move on to a quick visual. I spoke earlier about tools like RDR helping us to maintain and improve our compliance threshold numbers. Due to confidentiality, I won't be showing the exact numbers, but the graph on this slide shows a comparison of compliance threshold numbers for Q2 and Q3 of 2020 versus Q2 and Q3 of 2021. We were able to shave almost 1 percentage point off in Q3 2021 versus Q3 of 2020. While several factors contribute to our overall decrease in chargebacks, it's safe to say that RDR has most certainly played a big role in the improvement and numbers that you see in this visual. So to wrap up, for us at Adaptive Health, this has been a win-win for us. Participating in RDR has provided immediate resolution to our customers. They've also received improved customer experience, and we have been able to save some money. So like I said, it's been a win-win, and we're excited to continue with RDR and to continue to be a partner with Verifi. And, thank you, Jeff, for bringing me on here today to share this with you all.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. It's great to see and hear about some of the experiences, see some of the data and the results behind that. And then to overall hear just about the gains that your organization's seeing just across the board, right? So as I said earlier, talking about the benefits to the acquirers, to the issuers, to the sellers. At the end of the day, the customer experience is key, and we're really excited about helping drive and innovate new solutions that can help deliver that 360 degrees of customer service and ultimately drive that improved experience. So again, thank you, Lauren, for sharing those details with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff and Lauren, for your insight into the benefits and the results so far of rapid dispute resolution. We're going to open up our Q&A now. We've had some questions throughout the presentation, but please continue to send them and we will get to them. So let's just jump straight in. Jeff, our first question is for you. Somebody is asking, when will all issuers be participating in the RDR process?
Great, thanks, Peter, and thanks everyone for joining us today. Really appreciate all the attendees, and got a really solid list of questions coming in. So thank you all. So back to the question. So on our side, we've been very actively engaged across the regions with the issuers to look at their activations, make sure they're compatible with the financial messaging and how all the service operates and works. For North America, very strong. We do have a few banks that have not yet activated, and we're going to be looking for them to turn on in January. Also, there's a question related to the Canadian market. They will also be activated in January. So RDR is truly a global solution. All issuers across all regions can participate, and as we shared earlier, the vast majority have already turned on the service. Latin America is a region that we do have low coverage currently. It is something that we're working closely with our account executives in that region, talking about the service and the solution for those issuers there, and working with them to participate in the program. Latin America took a different approach than what we've taken across the other regions. We opted in the issuers to participate in North America, Europe, CEMEA, and then Asia Pacific did as well. So Latin America is taking a different approach, and that's why that was reflected as lower coverage. But fully anticipate seeing the coverage grow in Latin America in the near future.
Thanks, Jeff. That's an interesting point, because we did have a couple of questions come in about LATAM and different countries in that region. So two birds with one stone there. That's great. A technical question about the process flow. At what point, and Jeff, this one is for you again, at what point in the process does the chargeback actually hit the chargeback ratio?
Yep, great question. So when we set out to develop and enhance and roll out rapid dispute resolution, it was really critical that we did so for the issuers and acquirers to be able to maintain the transparency and keep the existing rails in place and not force a significant change there. So with the pre-dispute phase, as I talked about in the presentation earlier, once that inquiry is in the pre-dispute phase, we have the opportunity to accept that liability and accept it through RDR. If it does not get accepted and the seller chooses to not accept that liability, then it will transfer through and become a chargeback, and that's the point at which it would count towards the dispute ratio for that particular seller. On the financial messaging side and the exchange of data between the issuers, Visa, and the acquirers, the information, the record of the RDR still flows through to the acquirer, but there's different indicators as part of that message that designates that that has already been accepted using the RDR service, and therefore there's no representment rights. That record would not count against the dispute ratio for the seller, and then the acquirer can still send that record on to their seller through whatever reconciliation or portals or file exchanges that they may offer to those sellers. So again, we looked at it as though we want to ensure that all participants can receive the information and maintain the visibility there. However, there's new ways that the acquirers interpret those records and can then reflect those in their reporting as a pre-dispute accepted RDR case.
Thanks, Jeff. And that's great insight. There's one question about what triggers that entire process. The question goes something like this. Can an issuer trigger an RDR case without a customer, they're using the word complaint, but a customer wishing for the RDR to be initiated? It needs to be initiated by a consumer ringing into their issuer. Is that right?
That's correct. That's correct. So for both fraud and non-fraud reasons for that original complaint, the RDR is it follows the same rules in terms of the issuer has certain requirements for them when they're fulfilling and submitting that pre-dispute into the Visa system. This is a case where it will become a chargeback and apply against that dispute ratio if action and if that RDR case is not accepted.
Thanks, Jeff. One question with regard to an RDR refund. Once RDR does a refund, will the merchant still engage in communication with the cardholder? And if it's successful, will the merchant perform a new sale? Can you talk through, and I think this comes back to another question that we've had around cancellation of future transactions for subscription models. Can you walk us through the credit versus refund piece and how that can impact the future engagement of the seller with the cardholder?
Sure. So it's really important that the sellers in the audience understand that if the RDR system receives this inquiry and your rules are set up to accept it, you're done, right? There's no action that you're required to take or that needs to be taken in order for the financial message to be resolved or the financial reconciliation to be resolved. So what the acceptance indicates is that the acquirer will handle the financial reconciliation with the issuer for that dispute amount. There's no refunding or crediting that the seller needs to do in response to getting that RDR case. If it is a subscription transaction, if it's a monthly recurring subscription, then you as the seller may choose to reach out, engage with that particular consumer, find out if you can get product back. That was something Lauren noted from her experience. That it's something that they found to be very helpful to then determine how you want to engage, right? So this RDR request is specific to that transaction. It does not impact, or accepting that RDR case does not accept or does not impact other transactions that may be in that continuity cycle. And it does not require you to cancel a subscription. I would definitely recommend just like any chargeback that you may be receiving today, to then reach out to the consumer, find out what was negative with that experience, and then you've got your own business protocols and process for how you want to handle other transactions related to that customer.
Thank you, Jeff. So there's a lot of like process questions coming through, so I'm just trying to kind of amalgamate them all together. One is with regard to a dispute versus a pre-dispute. Can an issuer file a dispute, which is what we know as the traditional chargeback, and then a cardholder initiate a pre-dispute? I think this comes back to the process and the stages of where pre-dispute sits and the fail-safes that are in place as well.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the question as well. So it's important, right? We're talking about the engagement or the inquiries are coming from the consumer contacting their issuer, raising an inquiry about that transaction. And that's where we framed this pre-dispute solution space, where we have another offering called Order Insight, which allows our sellers to share receipt and order level details either directly with the cardholder or with the issuer who may be on the phone with that cardholder to help them recognize the transaction, avoid that confusion, and ideally give the right experience, help the cardholder understand the transaction, and then hang up the phone and move on and be done. And then therefore there's no dispute that gets raised. In the event that the cardholder still wants to proceed, then that's where the issuer would submit that information to the Visa platform, and that's when RDR is then invoked and evaluated to determine if that seller wants to accept the liability for that particular transaction and auto-resolve it through the rules and the capabilities we've covered here today. And then in the event that that transaction is not accepted by the seller, then it would flow to the acquirer as the traditional dispute process or received as that record, just as though you were today before you were using RDR. So hopefully that helps explain, definitely we can, if you've got some additional questions or if something's not clear there, definitely happy to have a follow-up call and get into some more of those details so that you can have a better understanding of how that works.
Thanks, Jeff. Some additional questions with regard to coverage, both country and also for additional card brands outside of Visa. One keen hawk-eyed viewer noticed that Canada was not colored in on our map. Can you walk us through at this point why it's grayed out and what the roadmap is for Canada and our products, please?
Yeah, sure, happy to. So we will be activating the issuers in the Canadian market at the end of January. We did our last activations as part of the October business enhancement release, which took place the middle of this past October. There was some technical controls in place that weren't able to be configured or adjusted before that release. And so we've done the testing with those issuers and have that ready to go now for January. So if you're a seller that's targeting consumers in the Canadian market, you'll be excited to know that we will have coverage for Canada at the end of this January, at the end of this 90 days out. Thanks,
Jeff. In terms of coverage then for card brands outside of Visa, a couple of questions around how we support other major card brands. Can you walk us through just very quickly how we are card agnostic and what we can do to help for pre-disputes for outside of Visa.
Yep. So the RDR solution is a Visa-only solution, and the reason for that is the control we have between the acquirer and the issuers to handle the financial messaging and do that within those file exchanges. We do offer another pre-dispute solution called our Cardholder Dispute Resolution Network, or CDRN, and that service is another one that we've offered or have offered for 12, 13 plus years now, which does apply to all card brands for those issuers who are participating. So we do have coverage in our pre-dispute space across all card brands, but the rapid dispute resolution service is Visa specific.
Thanks, Jeff. I'd like to bring Lauren into the mix. We've had a question come through for her. One viewer is curious to see or to hear what you're seeing in terms of impact on friendly fraud and how your business is addressing that. Lauren, do you mind walking us through your observations for friendly fraud, please?
Sure. Again, thank you guys for having me, and happy to answer that question. So for us, a large portion of the fraud that we do see come in is friendly fraud, but fortunately our chargebacks are at a low, and we're seeing a good decrease across the board for chargebacks, which also means in turn that our friendly fraud is going down as well.
Fabulous. That's a great thing to hear. There's a couple of questions coming through about rules, Jeff, and how sellers can customize their rules, the conditions that they can have. Can audio rules be set to certain amounts to partially credit certain transactions? Can you differentiate rules based on MIDs? Can you give us just a little bit of a rundown on the customization available to sellers through the rules and attributes with RDR?
Yeah, absolutely. So the rules in what's set up is really designed to be as flexible as possible, given the attributes related to a dispute that we can leverage to make a decision on. So if you think about the chargebacks that you get today from your acquirer, we know the amount of the dispute, we know the date, we know the currency code, we know the descriptor that was used in the transaction. So we've taken these attributes and then leveraged a very easy to configure rules interface that allows you to define multiple conditions for a particular rule to designate which pre-disputes you want to accept. And again, that's really important. It's an all or nothing in terms of the amount. So if it's a 1999 dispute and the conditions are met, then you would be accepting that dispute amount for that amount and therefore accepting the liability for that transaction and then getting the benefits of the RDR service. And then the financial reconciliation is happening between the acquirer and the issuers. So definitely we've looked at the rules and have gotten a lot of feedback. We had an extensive beta period where we worked very closely with some key sellers to get that feedback and make sure that we were creating and supporting the logic and the scenarios that those sellers were after. We talked about it earlier that the vast majority are accepting rules under fairly basic conditions. Amount seems to be the most common. You may have a strategy where you want to do representments for transactions that are over, say, $50 or $100. because there's more, the time that you're putting into that or using a service provider to fight those, it's more economical for you to fight those and try to win those than, say, your small dollar transactions or disputes. So that's where the rules are flexible, and amount seems to be the most common condition or attribute that you use as part of those conditions.
Great, and you can also customize it based on dispute reason code. So if folks want to accept all fraud, they can. Or can you maybe walk us through the benefits of that, and just maybe talk about using dispute codes as a condition?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. That was one very, very important call out that we do have the Visa reason codes, 10.4, for instance, for fraud. That is part of the conditions that can be set. So you may look at your representment success rate, or you may have a relationship with your acquirer that you just don't fight those. So here, use RDR to accept it, and then ensure that that's automated. It's a better experience. You don't have to worry about handling those and accepting those through your acquirer. You can leverage RDR to do that here, and then you get the benefits of those not counting towards your dispute ratio. So that's a really important distinction here as well, is RDR has a benefit to our participating sellers that those pre-disputes that are accepted using the RDR service will not go into Visa's dispute ratio calculations for compliance monitoring. However, if it's a fraud, if it's reported fraud, that is a separate process, a separate formula, a separate mechanism. So RDR does not have an impact on a seller's fraud ratio calculations. It only has an impact on a seller's dispute ratio calculation. So that is a very important distinction that I want to make sure the audience is aware of.
Thanks, Jeff. That's a super important distinction as well. Some person has just asked to clarify around the amount rule within RDR. Can RDR accept partial amount of overall transaction, or does it need to be the full transaction amount?
In order for a dispute being submitted by the issuer for it to qualify for RDR, it must be for the full amount of the transaction. So there is a few eligibility checks that we apply for the disputes as we receive them from the issuers, and that's one that the transaction amount. Let's, for instance, say it's $19.99. The dispute being filed per the inquiry from the cardholder must be for that full amount of $19.99, so that when the rules conditions are being evaluated, it is a all or nothing decision. So to indicate that you want to accept that RDR pre-dispute indicates that you're accepting full financial responsibility for the transaction amount, and that's what's going to be indicated, and that's how it's going to be reconciled.
Thanks, Jeff, for that. We are coming to the end of our questions. I know that there's a lot coming through, and we're super grateful. Some of the ones that we're getting are related to pricing, and individual pricing and charges and fees. And anyone on the call, I would encourage you to reach out to either your Verifi or your Visa account executive for individual pricing questions. Pricing is very specific to individual business relationships, so it wouldn't be appropriate to address on this call. So please do reach out to your account executive or your relationship manager if you do have any questions. Jeff, another question that came through is related to mobile pay disputes. How do we handle those ones?
Yep, great question. So regardless of how you've processed the authorization, what other form factor, if you use tokenization, if you use 3D Secure, if you used a point-of-sale terminal. Those are all accepted through the process. So if it's eligible, if it's a transaction that's eligible to be disputed, in some of those programs I just mentioned, you may have dispute protection. For instance, 3D Secure, right? It could be a transaction that you use 3D Secure and you fully authenticated that cardholder, and then the cardholder's claiming that was a fraudulent transaction. You're not going to see a chargeback or a predispute for RDR for that, right? You've gotten protection. So the transactions and the disputes, rather, that are going to be RDR eligible and coming through are ones that you don't have protection on, and we're providing you that solution with the flexibility to make that decision during that predispute phase and accept or decline the financial liability at that point. So mobile pay disputes are accepted, e-commerce, swipe, all the form factors for how you would be accepting those Visa transactions for authorization, those would all be eligible.
Thanks, Jeff. So two questions that kind of are related around the unified system of how banks, acquirers, and issuers act when flagging disputes resolved with RDR. So I think this question is coming down to what system does this work on? If the question further goes on to talk about what requirements have been put in place by Visa, and I'd like to tack on to the end of that, how is Visa working with these financial institutions to ensure that things are working smoothly? Could you walk us through that entire, and I'll come back to you if I need to clarify any questions. I know it's quite loaded, but could you just walk us through that, please? We've got a couple of questions around that one.
Yep. Yeah, Peter, and please, if I start rambling and don't cover one of those points, definitely keep me honest. But in general, this is really where the power of the Visa network comes to play, in how we've been able to activate this RDR solution and get north of 70, soon to be north of 80% of global issuer coverage in the last 18 months is because this is all operated and managed through Visa's global network. So we've really looked at how we can ride those existing rails, minimize the disruption for issuers and acquirers, but maximize the value for sellers. It's value for all stakeholders, all participants. But this is all based on the Visa financial exchange between issuers, Visa, and acquirers. So I made some comments to financial IDs, and there's different values there's prefix values that mean certain codes to indicate when the RDR predispute is accepted. That's all in like the technical mechanics of how data is exchanged between the Visa platform, Visa Resolve Online, and the acquirers and the issuers. So it's fundamentally built into the network. Did I cover it, Peter? Or is there some
I think you got it. I think how Visa is working with these acquirers is quite important, and I think we've covered that one.
Okay. Let me actually, Peter, just made me think of another point. So one of the things that Visa has done is there's been certain mandates for acquirers and issuers that we've provided notice and then obviously followed through with to do these activations. And there's a couple other questions related to acquirer readiness and availability and things like that. So I'll try to touch that here. So as we've ramped up the issuer coverage, then on the other side of the network, the acquirers and sellers, we understand that there is a certain level of reporting or indicators that, hey, this has been a inquiry raised by the cardholder, it's been accepted by the seller in the pre-dispute phase, and therefore there's no representment rights for that particular transaction. So Visa mandated as of April of 2021 that acquirers be compatible and accept these indicators in these financial messages and provide the right experience to their sellers in order to differentiate an RDR accepted transaction versus one that's not accepted and therefore still has representment rights, and it's more of a BAU process. So through that April communication and the mandate for acquirers, that's where we view that the market is now ready. Obviously, there's likely some debate or some difference in how some acquirers have implemented those changes, but we're definitely working with them on making that happen and ensuring that they're compatible and ready for those data files.
Thanks, Jeff. I think we've come to the end of what I would probably class as one of the most successful Q&A sessions that we've ever held. Super grateful for everybody who attended today to send through your questions, and the engagement I think has been great. Jeff and Lauren, I'd like to thank you both for your time in the run-up to the webinar and also for your time today. I think it's been very informative on a really interesting topic. For those of you watching, if you do have any follow-up questions, please reach out to your Visa or Verifi relationship manager. We are here to help. Or you can email info@verifi.com also. Our webinar will be uploaded to verifi.com in the coming days, and everyone will receive a link if you do want to rewatch it and pick up maybe on some details that you might have missed. I think that's pretty much it. Not seeing any more questions coming through. I know that we're at the top of the hour. So thanks everybody for attending. Looking forward to seeing everybody on our next webinar. So thank you all and have a great day.